I'm Sarah, welcome to Grace My Space. Today we're doing part 3 of our 3-part series on indoor plant care. Now if you missed the first 2 videos, I did a full walkthrough plant tour of my home, naming all of the plants in my home. I've got several dozen, maybe too many, and then talking also about which ones are best for beginners. And then in part 2, we talked all about the best tips for how to care for your plants as a beginner. Maybe you have a little bit of knowledge, maybe you have no knowledge. So this video is perfect for anybody who really wants to get into having houseplants in their home, but really doesn't know where to start. And then today, we are gonna talk about propagation. Let's make some baby plants. To start, let's cover some really basic facts. Propagation is just taking cuttings from plants and making new plants. You can do this with almost any plant, but they all do it a little bit differently. So today I'm going to focus on just some specific ones for beginners. We're just gonna snip that right on up there. Now when you're propagating, there's specific things you need to look for. They're called nodes. I also like to look for a growing end to my vine. This is specifically for pothos, philodendrons, creeping figs, most of your vining plants in general. This is my first step. Just gonna snip a whole bunch of them. Now this is considered pruning your plant, but it's also a great way to propagate. So you can see here, I've cut this vine before to propagate, and it was like, oh, I can't grow that way anymore. I'm gonna grow out this way instead. So it promotes directional growth. It also promotes healthy growth from the top of the plant to take away from the vines, but then you can make a bunch of babies out of it. So let's get to that. This guy's super healthy. We're gonna just, right there. I've cut this baby a few times too. We're gonna go up a little higher. All right, we're making some baby plants here. We've got our cuttings. We've got a jar of water. Those are basically all you need, and a scissors. You can see this is where I have propagated this particular vine before, and it started growing a different direction. Now I'm gonna show you how to do it again. This vine is thick and mature and healthy, and look at that right there. You see where it looks like roots are coming out? That started as a node, and then it was like, man, I really want to grow, and I'm gonna just do it. And so it formed roots. Now this is a philodendron, this is a pothos, which the node looks slightly different. It's just like a little bump, and you'll find them right where a leaf is coming out. This is where your new roots are going to form so that you can make your new baby plants. So there are quite a few methods of propagation. You can do it with water, you can do it without water, directly in soil. I like to watch the roots form in the water so I know how big they are before I plant them, just a preference. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut right where those nodes are and put the nodes right in the water. See where my node is? I cut down here to leave the stem so that it has something to hold on to in the water. Then I'm gonna cut right above the node. And now what we have is a fresh cutting with a healthy node. You can have a leaf or you cannot have a leaf. The leaf doesn't matter, but it does add some fullness once they form roots and you plant it. And you just stick it right in the water. That one's a little too long for my node to reach the water. It's not about this part reaching the water, it's about the node reaching the water, okay? So we're gonna do that for several of these. Now this one's a brand new leaf. I probably shouldn't have cut that one. Not sure how well that one will survive, but we'll give it a try. Now I do make sure that I have a growing tip somewhere in there, because this will be planted and then it will keep growing. These other ones will not keep growing from the vine. They'll be in the top of the plant, but they will not tendril. So you need a growing tip in order for that to keep on getting longer once you've planted it. Here's a great example of not needing a leaf. As long as you have the nodes on there, it'll form roots and you can plant it. I like keeping the leaves not only because it's fuller, but also it helps hold them so they don't just all sink to the bottom of your water. Now we have the beginnings of either one plant that's gonna look very full once you plant them all, or like, I don't know, 15 new individual plants. It's your choice. Make sure that your node is submerged, change out the water every 3 days or so, pop it in a windowsill, and watch your roots form. Now, once your roots start to form, you might need to, you know, like this is a lot for one little jar, but I'm actually gifting this to a friend so that she can start her own heartleaf philodendron, and so I put them all in here just for transportation's sake. But once your roots start to be about 2 inches long inside of your jar, which is why I like to leave it in a jar, you can then just transfer it to soil and create your new plant and water as you would any other normal plant. I have created dozens of plants from one mother plant doing this method. You can also do it directly into soil. I've never done that before. I feel like it would be harder, but a lot of people say it's not, so I guess you can experiment. Now, do you remember this plant from my first video? It has a lot of problems. I want to show you 2 different ways that you can solve this problem. The first is a repot option to keep the plant healthy and growing, and the second is splitting, which will produce more plants. See how there's a little root coming out of the bottom? That needs to be repotted. Now, normal people would do this outside, but I live in Michigan. There's no way I'm standing out in the freezing cold to repot this plant. And also the shock of the cold would likely just do it in. So I'm gonna take a skewer, like a kebab, and just break it off the sides all the way down because it's so ready to be repotted that it has adhered itself pretty significantly to the side of the pot. Plant neglect, strong over here. It just doesn't want to come. It is attached. Okay. Looked right into that. Look at that. Oh my word. Okay. Long ago, someone once told me to put rocks on the bottom of my pots for drainage. That's not how you get drainage in a pot. Now the roots have completely encompassed the rocks, and I have to dig them out. Standing water in the bottom of a pot, even if it's around rocks, doesn't mean that you have good drainage. It just means that now your roots are gonna grow and it's gonna seek out the water. It's gonna go all the way down until it finds it in the rocks, and it's going to cause root rot, and it's going to cause them to no longer be in the soil, but rather now your roots are surrounded by rocks, which provide them 0 nutrients. So you want soil to be all the way down to the bottom of your pot so your roots are getting the food that they need. This is a mess. I'm just gonna trim some of these up. It's like giving a haircut. And I'm gonna break up the soil, and it's kind of like aerating, you know, if you ever aerate your lawn, so that your roots can have a chance at life. I'm also gonna prune this because it really just needs to divert some of the energy that it's currently putting into growing the long tendrils into becoming a healthy plant again. I'm just gonna keep the healthiest. So you see how there's a long span where there were no leaves? That was a long lifetime of neglect. And then I started paying attention, and it's like, oh, I can form leaves now. You've got a lot of those in this particular plant. Now here's what I decided to do. I actually decided to divide this plant because I wanted a small plant, not a large plant, for the bathroom. And it just needs to be smaller. So we're gonna take what was once a large plant and divide it to accomplish that goal, and also just give it a little bit better chance of life. Now, if I were to keep the whole plant together and I needed to repot it because it was in too small of a pot, then you would go up one size pot. So instead of going from this size to like a 10-inch or something like that, just go about one size bigger. And when you break up the roots and allow it to have a little bit more air and room to grow down there, that's all it really takes to give it a little bit more of a oomph, a little lease on life. Now you'll notice I'm putting this into a plastic grow pot because it has drainage, and the pot that I want to put it in does not. So either drill a hole in your pot or use a grow pot and then pop it inside of a pretty one. And here it is, a smaller version of the same plant. Works much better in this space, and it's looking a lot better. You know what? I tried to not capture myself, but mirrors just, they're not friends of videographers. Now let's take a look at a bigger plant, my Monstera. It spanned about 6 feet wide and 5 feet tall and was just way too gigantic for my home, and so I decided to divide it. Now let's look at some basic anatomy of this plant. The little bump where my thumb is right now is the node, and the longer area is called an aerial root. Those provide structure and support for climbing plants. Now Monsteras grow very large in the wild, and they are climbing plants. So those aerial roots would naturally support the plant out in the nature, not just nature. And so I decided to use the aerial roots to actually give my plant support with this piece of wood, but over time it just wasn't working anymore and became much too big. So I decided to split it. I needed Aaron's help because the plant was so large and I needed to hold portions of it up in order for it not to get broken hanging on the floor. And when I got into the roots, there were about 3 main plants, and so I divided it, pulled them all apart, picked the ones that I wanted to replant to make this plant smaller to fit my own home, and put it back into the right size pot. Then I cut above those nodes, just like I showed you with the pothos and philodendrons, and popped those in water to give to a friend. Now the plant fits much better in the space that I have, and it's rewarding me. It's saying, thank you so much for repotting me with a brand new leaf. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that you found this helpful to learn some really basic propagation tips for some really beginner friendly plants. I wanted to make this easy for you if you had zero knowledge on indoor plant care, and I hope that that task was accomplished. Thank you for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for next week's video.